Breaking news tonight, the search for missing Fort Valley student Anitra Gunn now over. GBI Special Agent J.T. Ricketson says her body was recovered in Crawford County near the Peach-Crawford County line. Zach Merchant has been covering the story throughout the day. He joins us live with the latest.
The Waffle House camera in Byron, Georgia doesn't know it's recording the last verifiable moment of Anitra LaShay Gunn's life. It is 2:04 in the morning, Valentine's Day. She is 23 years old. Weeks from graduating, she has dimples people remember long after they've forgotten everything else about meeting her. He is DeMarcus Little, her boyfriend, an Army sergeant. He is watching her the way you watch something you're afraid of losing. They leave together at 2:30. The camera catches the back of her as she walks out the door. That is the last time any camera, anywhere, sees Anitra Gunn alive. Between that parking lot and sunrise, she will be dead. Her body will be hidden in a pine thicket in Crawford County, covered with sticks and brush, 150 feet off a two-lane road that almost nobody drives. And DeMarcus Little will spend the next 4 days acting like she simply walked away. How did we get here? Welcome to Hidden Motive Crime. If you're new here, please subscribe and turn on that notification bell. We bring you the untold details of true crime cases, the facts others leave behind, and the truths that deserve to be heard. To our returning family, thank you for coming back. Tonight we are in Fort Valley, Georgia, Peach County, February 2020. And this case is not what it looked like on the surface. 4 things you need to know before we go any further. 1. Anitra LaShay Gunn was last seen alive on Valentine's Day, a Friday, after visiting a Waffle House in Byron, Georgia, with her boyfriend DeMarcus Little at 2 a.m. By the time her family started calling that afternoon, she was already gone. 2. Her 2013 white Chevrolet Cruze was found the next day, abandoned near her apartment on Bell Street in Fort Valley. The front bumper was torn off. Her wallet was still inside. She was not. 3. While her father Christopher drove from Atlanta to file a missing persons report, while her classmates at Fort Valley State University organized search parties, while helicopters from Georgia State Patrol flew grids over 3 counties, someone was using Anitra's phone to send texts to her friends as if she was still alive. Days into the search, that same person sent Christopher Gunn a text demanding an $8,000 ransom. 4. DeMarcus Little eventually drove his friend Yeva Abron directly to the spot where Anitra's body was hidden. In that car, on that drive, he told Abron exactly what he had done and exactly why. At that confession, that phone, that bumper lying in the leaves 150 feet off Greer Road. These are the pieces that investigators put together in the weeks and months that followed. Anitra Gunn was a senior agriculture major who had done everything she was supposed to do. She was building something. She had a future that was right there, close enough to touch. DeMarcus Little decided that one moment on Valentine's night, one reaction she had to something he said, made her life forfeit. Stay with me, because every detail in this case matters, and every detail leads somewhere. Anitra LaShay Gunn was not supposed to be a story about a crime. She was supposed to be a story about a graduation. She grew up in Atlanta. She graduated from Westlake High School in 2016 and arrived at Fort Valley State University, a historically black university in Peach County, Georgia, with a clear direction: agriculture. She was going to finish her degree, walk across that stage, and build a life. By February 2020, she was weeks away from doing exactly that. Her professor, Bobby Dickey, saw her the Wednesday before Valentine's Day. He later told reporters she was excited for the semester. That was the last time he spoke to her. She worked the lunch shift, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., at 1836 Restaurant and Lounge in Fort Valley. The owner, Kelvin Blaylock, hired her back in October 2019. He said years later that the first thing that hit him about Anitra was her smile, that it lit up a room. Her co-worker and close friend Brittany Gay worked those same shifts beside her. One co-workers remembered her as kind, thoughtful, the kind of person who took an interest in you and made you feel like you mattered. Her friend India King, who spoke at her funeral, said Anitra would give you her last if you asked. She called her a leader and a nurturer. Anitra had a big family and she stayed connected to all of them. Her father, Christopher Gunn, spoke to her regularly. The morning of February 14th, Valentine's Day, he called to wish her a happy one. It was an ordinary call. Father and daughter. He had no reason to think it was the last one. She was scheduled to work her lunch shift at 1836 that afternoon. She never called ahead when she didn't show. That, Blalock said, was not like her at all. Now, before we go any further, there is something worth sitting with. In the weeks before Valentine's Day, Anitra had done some quiet things. She had changed her locks. The windows at her apartment on West Church Street had needed repairs. She had not explained any of this to the people around her. She kept her reasons to herself. She went about her days, classes, shifts, conversations, carrying something privately. She was 5 feet 7 inches tall, black hair, brown eyes, dimples that people bring up, unprompted, years after meeting her. When someone you care about starts making their home more secure and won't say why, what does that tell you? What would you do? Leave your answer below. DeMarcus Little was 22 years old, an Army sergeant stationed at Fort Gordon in Augusta. He was the kind of person who, on paper, looked structured, disciplined, a man with a rank and a uniform and a chain of command. He had met Anitra Gunn through a mutual friend, India Head, who later testified at his trial. She was the one who introduced them. She could not have known what she was setting in motion. Their relationship, as Little himself described it to police, was on again, off again. But the text messages that prosecutors laid in front of the jury in March 2022 told a more precise story. The messages went back 4 months before Anitra's death. On November 1st, 2019, she ended it. She texted him directly. She said she thought they should stop talking to each other altogether, that it was the only way she could process what was happening. She called him the love of her life in the same message. She said she loved him forever. Within hours, Little responded that he planned to take his life. Anitra did not leave. The text messages showed she continued communicating with him after that, and in the months that followed, the messages shifted. Little began questioning Anitra's relationships with other men, constantly, according to trial testimony. At one point, he told her, in writing, that they were going to have serious problems if she went out with a man he believed she had a connection with. He sent her a screenshot showing he had offered $200 to someone to harm that man. On January 13th, 2020, 1 month before she was killed, Anitra sent him a message that prosecutors read aloud in court. She wrote, "You came into my house last night without an open invitation, touched me several times after I repeatedly asked you not to, forcefully took my keys away from me. But when I retaliated, I was the bad guy." That text was sent 32 days before Valentine's Day. And then came February 5th. DeMarcus Little drove from Augusta to Fort Valley, more than 90 miles. He was not invited. He arrived at Anitra's apartment on West Church Street. Through a window, he saw what he believed was evidence that she had moved on. He left the property. But on his way out, he threw a brick through the window near her back door. He slashed her tires. Anitra woke to the sound of shattering glass. She filed a police report. She told the responding officer she didn't know who was responsible. She did not name him. Fort Valley PD Lieutenant Demetrius Kendrick testified at trial that DeMarcus Little later walked into a police station voluntarily the day after Anitra's body was found, and admitted to it himself. He said he had driven from Augusta because he was tracking her phone's location. He said he saw a man inside. He said he became emotional. He said she had blocked him. He was not charged for what he did to her property until the evening of February 18th. The same evening, her body was pulled out of the woods in Crawford County. That brick, those slashed tires, a police report that named no one, charges that came too late. What happened on February 5th was not a jealous outburst. It was a man who drove 90 miles to punish a woman for living her own life. And every person who touched that police report and moved on from the first chapter of what was coming. A man drives over 90 miles uninvited to destroy someone's property because he suspected she had moved on. At what point does that cross a line for you? Tell me in the comments. I want to know where people draw it. By the time February 13th came around, Anitra Gunn and DeMarcus Little had been in each other's orbit for months. She had tried to end it in November. He had threatened to take his own life. She had stayed in contact. And somewhere in that back and forth, Valentine's Day became the night they were together again. It started with a party. Trial testimony from Tracy King and his sister India Head placed the timeline clearly. Around 11 p.m. on February 13th, DeMarcus Little picked up Tracy King and Yavin Abran. He was driving a black car with a red stripe. When the group arrived at the party, India Head was already there, and so was Anitra Gunn. She had not arrived with them, but she left with them. Tracy King testified that she sat in the back seat beside him. Yvonne Abron drove the group to Anitra's house on Church Street in Fort Valley and dropped the couple off there. The night did not end at her front door. Around 1:30 a.m., Anitra and DeMarcus got into her white 2013 Chevrolet Cruze and drove toward Byron. The Waffle House security camera placed them inside the restaurant at 2:04 a.m. They sat across from each other. She was smiling. Nothing in that footage suggested what was waiting on the other side of the next hour. They left the Waffle House together around 2:30 a.m. Their destination was the home of DeMarcus Little's aunt, Sherry Tolbert, known to those around her as Aunt Glock, on Chestnut Hill Road in Peach County. Tolbert herself took the stand at trial and confirmed she lived there. That house on Chestnut Hill Road is the last confirmed location where Anitra LaShay Gunn was alive. What the jury would later hear, in Anitra's own words, through text messages prosecutors read aloud, was that she had not been confused about who DeMarcus Little was. She had called him evil, manipulative, narcissistic. She had documented in writing that he had entered her home without invitation, touched her without consent, and taken her keys by force. She had tried, in her own careful way, to create distance. She changed her locks. She blocked his number. She filed a police report and left his name off it. She was not reckless. She was navigating a man who had made leaving dangerous. After 2:30 a.m. on February 14th, Anitra Gunn went silent. No calls answered. No texts returned. Her brother tried. Her father tried. Her friend Sierra Stewart, who later testified at trial, said she began messaging DeMarcus Little directly. Am I asking if he knew where Anitra was? After hours of back and forth, Little told Stewart that Anitra had accidentally shared her iPhone location with him, and he had just remembered. Stewart asked him for the address. He told her he could not zoom in on it. That was the answer he gave to a friend searching for a missing woman. Fort Valley police conducted a welfare check at Anitra's apartment on West Church Street. Nothing looked disturbed, no signs of a struggle. She was simply not there. On February 15th, Christopher Gunn drove from Atlanta to Fort Valley to file the missing persons report himself. That same afternoon, Anitra's white 2013 Chevrolet Cruze was found abandoned in a neighbor's yard on Bell Street, close to her apartment. The front bumper was gone. Her wallet was still inside. The GBI arrived to process the vehicle. When investigators examined the front grille, they found something that would quietly reshape the entire search. Pine brush and shrubbery, the kind that grows along narrow rural roads, packed deep into the grille. The car had been somewhere off the main roads. It had been moving through the kind of terrain that doesn't show up on any regular route. The car was pointing toward the woods. Investigators just didn't know which woods yet. And then came the texts. While Christopher Gunn was in Fort Valley filing paperwork, while Anitra's classmates at Fort Valley State were organizing search parties, while Georgia State Patrol helicopters were flying grids over 3 counties, someone was using Anitra's phone to send messages to her friends. The people who received them said they felt wrong. The tone was off. The responses were stilted. They did not sound like her. Days into the search, Christopher Gunn received a text demanding $8,000 for his daughter's return. Prosecutors traced that message. The email address it came from was attached to a device that had connected to Google repeatedly from a location where DeMarcus Little was staying. He was not just waiting for the search to pass, he was watching it. He was sending ransom demands to a grieving father, while Anitra's body lay covered in sticks and brush 150 feet off Greer Road in Crawford County. He knew exactly where she was, every call her family made, every search party her classmates joined, every helicopter pass over those pine thickets. He watched all of it and said nothing. If you received a text from a missing friend and something felt off about it, would you know what to do? Would you know who to call? Talk to me in the comments. What happened inside that house on Chestnut Hill Road in the early hours of February 14th, 2020? We know because DeMarcus Little told someone. He told his friend Javen Abron. And 2 years later, Javen Abron told a courtroom. According to Abron's sworn testimony at trial, Little described the moment plainly. He said he poured his heart out to Anitra. He told her he loved her. He waited for her response. She laughed. That was it. That was the moment. According to Abron, Little said he blacked out. He hit her. Then he grabbed her and choked her until she was dead. The GBI Medical Examiner's Office in Macon completed the autopsy on February 20th. The cause of death listed in the arrest warrant affidavit was manual strangulation. The manner of death, homicide. After she was dead, Little put Anitra's body in the trunk of her own car, her white 2013 Chevrolet Cruze. He drove south out of Peach County into Crawford County, down Greer Road, and turned off into the woods. He carried her body approximately 150 feet from the road. He covered her with the sticks and brush. The front bumper of the car had been damaged on the rough terrain. He left it there beside her. Then he drove the car back toward Fort Valley, abandoned it on Bell Street near her apartment, and began sending texts from her phone. Prosecutors did not have to rely on the confession alone. The cached location data from DeMarcus Little's own phone placed him in those Crawford County woods between 1:05 p.m. and 1:47 p.m. on February 14th. That is the window when investigators believe Anitra's body was being left in the ground. When prosecutor Don Baskin put that data in front of him on the stand 2 years later, Little said the technology must be wrong. He had no other explanation. The jury had one. By February 17th, 3 days after Anitra was last seen, the search had grown into something the region had rarely seen. A joint task force was formally established. The Fort Valley Police Department, the Peach County Sheriff's Office, the Fort Valley State University Police Department, the Bibb County District Attorney's Office, and the GBI's Perry Office. Crawford County's Sheriff Lewis Walker would later join and request the GBI take over the investigation entirely. Georgia State Patrol flew aerial grids. 20 Fort Valley State students organized their own ground search parties. A $5,000 reward through Macon Regional Crime Stoppers was posted for information. 3 counties, helicopters, drones, volunteers walking tree lines. The break came from Anitra's car. The pine brush and shrubbery packed into the front grille had narrowed the search to roads that barely showed on a map. Unpaved cuts through rural Crawford County. On February 18th, a Peach County investigator working a ground search off Greer Road stopped at a wooded stretch that caught his attention. He got out. He walked into the trees. 150 feet from the road, he found the front bumper of Anitra's Chevrolet Cruze. Next to it, covered in sticks and branches, as if placed there deliberately, was Anitra LaShay Gunn. She had been there for 4 days. Peach County Sheriff Terry Dees stood before cameras that afternoon and said what investigators had quietly known for days. I think it's pretty common sense who our person of interest is. It's the boyfriend. We've talked to him 3 times. That evening, at 6:30 p.m., DeMarcus Little was arrested. He was charged that night with criminal damage to property for the February 5th attack on Anitra's home and car. 30 minutes before the press conference announcing the arrest, investigators recovered Anitra's missing phone. 1 week later, to the day she was last seen alive, he was formally charged with malice murder. 4 days. 4 days she was in those woods while her father drove from Atlanta, while her classmates searched fields, while her friends waited on a text back. What does justice mean in a case like this? I want to hear from you in the comments. DeMarcus Little was charged with malice murder on February 21st, 2020. He appeared in court and was denied bond. The case then moved into the hands of the prosecution team that would spend the next 2 years building something that could hold up under cross-examination, under doubt, and under the weight of a defense that would call the technology wrong and the witnesses unreliable. Lead Assistant District Attorney Don Baskin took point. A DA Neil Halverson and Chief ADA Cindy Adams sat beside her. GBA Special Agent Kristen Nunes anchored the investigative side of the table. They built the case in layers. The foundation was the phone. Cache location data, the kind of device stores automatically. Independent of whether the user switches it on or off, Placed DeMarcus Little's phone in the Crawford County woods off Greer Road between 1:05 p.m. and 1:47 p.m. on February 14th. That is the same stretch of woods where Anitra's body was found 4 days later. That data did not come from a witness. It did not come from a confession. It came from Little's own device. On top of that, women's clothing found in the trunk of Little's car. The February 5th brick and slash tires, reframed not as a property dispute, but as documented, escalating physical control. The ransom text to Christopher Gunn traced through an email address attached to a device that had connected to Google from a location where Little was staying. And then there was Javon Abron. Abron, 22, Little's friend since high school, was arrested on February 26th, charged with 2 counts of making false statements to law enforcement and 1 count of concealing a death. He had lied to police in the initial days of the investigation, but when he took the stand at trial, he told a different story. He testified that 2 days after the murder, Little texted him, picked him up, and drove him directly to the spot in Crawford County where Anitra's body was hidden. In that car on that drive, Little confessed. Then the 2 of them retrieved the front bumper from the scene and threw it on the side of a highway. Abron stated under oath he received no deal from prosecutors for his testimony. He was still facing his own charges. He said he simply told what he knew. One detail the jury never heard directly: statements Anitra had made to friends and family about Little's behavior and their relationship were ruled inadmissible hearsay by Judge Connie Williford. The prosecution had to build its case without Anitra's own words about what she had been living through. They won anyway. The trial of DeMarcus Little opened on March 7, 2022, 2 years and 21 days after Anitra Gunn was last seen alive. Approximately 80 Peach County residents were summoned for jury duty. The pool narrowed quickly. 4 potential jurors, all women, were dismissed after stating they had already formed opinions on Little's guilt. 1 had been part of the search party for Anitra. 12 jurors and 2 alternates were seated. Judge Williford told them from the start, this would not be a quick trial. 7 days of testimony followed. Prosecutors walked the jury through the phone data, the text messages, the ransom demand, the clothing in the trunk, and a bronze account of the confession in the car. They read Anitra's own texts aloud, the ones where she called Little evil, manipulative, narcissistic, the ones where she documented him entering her home without permission and taking her keys by force. Then DeMarcus Little took the stand in his own defense. He called Anitra his soulmate. He said he would never have hurt her. When Baskin circled back to the cache location data, the window between 1:05 and 1:47 p.m., Little said the technology was wrong. Baskin pointed out that he had agreed every other piece of cache data from his phone was accurate. He had no answer for why that specific window was the exception. Some of Anitra's family members stood and walked out of the courtroom during that exchange. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury came back. Felony murder, guilty. Aggravated assault, guilty. Malice murder, not guilty. The distinction matters legally. The jury found that Little did not plan the killing in advance, but that he caused her death during the commission of a violent assault. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Anitra's family addressed the court before sentencing. They talked about a graduation that never happened, job interviews she had lined up. The woman Fort Valley and everyone who knew her dimples and her laugh never got to see finish what she started. Felony murder guilty, malice murder not guilty. The judge still gave him life without parole. Do you think the verdict was just, or does the distinction between those charges matter to you? Drop your take in the comments. On February 20th, 2020, the same day the GBI officially ruled Anitra's death a homicide, more than 100 people gathered on the sidewalk outside 1836 Restaurant and Lounge in Fort Valley. They released 23 balloons, one for every year she lived. A local pastor read from Psalms 121. They counted to 3 and chanted together, "Forever Anitra." Her coworker Mia Jordan sat at the bar afterward, staring toward the door. She could not finish her sentence. Her friend India King spoke at the funeral held at Greater Peace Baptist Church in Opelika, Alabama. She said Anitra would give you her last if you asked. She said they had decided to make their friendship forever. Fort Valley Mayor Barbara Williams presented a formal proclamation of condolences to the Gunn family on behalf of the entire city. Christopher Gunn released a statement thanking everyone who had searched for his daughter. He asked for privacy. He asked for prayers. He had driven from Atlanta to find her, and what February gave him instead was something no parent should ever have to carry. Peach County Sheriff Terry Dees said it plainly at the time. The community had been wonderful, and it had. 20 Fort Valley State students organized their own search parties. A $5,000 Crime Stoppers reward was posted. Anitra's classmates walked tree lines looking for their friend. Anitra Gunn's case did not exist in isolation. Just months earlier, in October 2019, Alexis Crawford, a 21-year-old senior at Clark Atlanta University, disappeared from her off-campus apartment. Her body was found days later in a DeKalb County park. She had also been killed by someone who knew her. 2 young black women, both college seniors, both in Georgia. Both killed within months of each other by men in their lives. Both cases forced a conversation that was long overdue about intimate partner violence targeting black women, about which missing persons cases receive sustained national attention, and about the gap between those two things. Why do you think some missing persons cases receive wall-to-wall coverage while others are covered only locally? What would it take to change that? This is a conversation worth having. Start it below. However, there are things about this case that cannot be filed away as unusual. DeMarcus Little drove more than 90 miles to stand outside Anitra Gunn's window. He threw a brick through her glass and cut her tires because he believed she had moved on. A police report was filed. It was logged. He was not charged until the night her body was found. Researchers who study intimate partner homicide have documented this pattern repeatedly. Property destruction directed at a partner is not a crime of passion. It is a declaration of ownership. It is one of the most consistent warning signs that the violence will escalate. Anitra knew. Her texts said it. She had called him evil, manipulative, narcissistic, in writing to people she trusted. She changed her locks. She blocked his number. She filed a report and left his name off it because she understood, on some level, what naming him might cost her. She was not careless. She was caught in the specific trap that controlling relationships build, where leaving openly is more dangerous than managing quietly. The same phone he used to send a ransom demand to her father, the same location data his device recorded without his knowledge, the tools he used to track her, deceive her family, and buy himself time became the evidence that put him in prison for the rest of his life. Anitra LaShay Gunn was 23 years old. She sang in the choir at New Canaan Baptist Church in Camp Hill, Alabama. She was weeks from graduating. She had job interviews lined up. She had dimples people still describe first, before anything else, when they talk about meeting her. She deserved every single thing that was waiting for her on the other side of that stage. If Anitra's name means something to you now, share this video. Her family spent 2 years fighting for a conviction. The least we can do is make sure she is not forgotten. If you or someone you know is living with the kind of warning signs this case carried, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. Free, confidential, 24 hours a day. Before you go, one question. If the system had treated that brick through the window as the warning it was, if February 5th had been taken seriously, would Anitra Gunn be alive today? Leave your answer below. I read every single one. Next week on Hidden Motive Crime, we go somewhere new. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and come back. Until then, stay safe, stay aware, and always look a little closer.